Hello, everyone. We'll be getting started here within the next 30 seconds to a minute. Just wanted to check in and let people know that content always starts 5 minutes after the top of the hour. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to the third episode of Inside the Criminal Mind. This week, we're going over an episode called Sex, Birth, and Death. This is episode 2, or season 2, episode 11 of Criminal Minds. So yeah, we're in the early beginning seasons of Criminal Minds, back when Mandy Patinkin was still in there. Fun fact, I know some people actually know this fact, but some people didn't. I didn't until like this week. So, Mandy Patinkin, does anybody know why Mandy Patinkin ended up quitting Criminal Minds and why they replaced him with Joe Mantegna, or however you say his last name? It was actually because basically making these episodes, obviously, these are kind of real life type of situations that can easily happen. I had a discussion with this with like my psychology program leads whenever I had a psychology or a psych club meeting earlier this week, and somehow we got into this topic, and so we started talking about it. And because Criminal Minds is a very diverse and in-depth type of show that's actually fairly realistic. So anyways, Mandy Patinkin ended up actually quitting because it was like really weighing down his mental health. And, he was really starting to experience the negative effects from working, well, not actually working in the BAU, but just doing all of this research and, getting into the character and having to expose yourself to certain scenarios, even if they're fake scenarios, even if you're just acting them out and, the people aren't actually dying and criminals aren't actually out here doing these things. These episodes are usually based on real life criminal cases. So, I thought that was a very, very interesting topic, or a very interesting point or fact about Mandy Patinkin. And you could obviously tell like how it could easily make his mental health a little less on the positive side. He really put a lot of effort into his character. He did an amazing job. But that's beside the point. So, I thought that was very interesting. So let's move on. As always, we always do it like this: introduction, synopsis, probable relevant theories, criminal prevention, and conclusion. I will admit, the headings to some of these are a little not, what's the word? It's not exactly how, they're not going to be like actual theories, and it's not actually going to be like tips on how to prevent these crimes, but these are basically theoretical discussions based in fact, obviously. I've been studying psychology for a while now, not as long as like a psychiatrist with like a 10 years practice, but like, I enjoy this topic a lot and I put a lot of pride into it. So anyways, now we can go on. The best part, the beginning, not really, is my personal intro. Obviously, if you know me, my name is Sharissa. If you know me from Instagram, you know me as Eradication Writer. If you know me from the business Instagram, it's Eradication Wellness. Other than that, you should know who I am, and you should probably get to know me. My own personal health, mental health journey has been a lot. Just to condense it down a little bit, I've experienced my own issues going through life. I've experienced my own mental health struggles. Some of them the same as a lot of people, but a lot of people struggle. I'm not saying that everybody has the same struggles, because obviously not, because every individual is not the same. Every individual is unique. Everyone has their own experiences. Everyone experiences things differently. And I think that that's one of the beautiful things of the world that we live in and the life that we live in, is that every individual is unique to their own, personality. Everybody's personality is not going to be the same. But yeah. And so that really inspired me. That inspired me to have my own mission in business and in life. In life and in business, all I want to do is just spread positivity and love and support for people who might not feel like they have the most adequate of support. I offer free support groups, which is I'm currently in the middle of restructuring because attendance was low, and but I try to make getting help easier, more easily accessible than what a lot of people might think it is. And that leads me to another sublet of my mission is to normalize the mental health conversation, normalize psychology or psychological principles into our everyday life, because psychology can really, in a way, solve some of the issues that we're seeing within life, within society. Because it all takes place it starts with the individual first. In order for us to better society, to make society better, we have to start with each individual and help each individual realize what they're missing in their life, or how they can be more accepted or have more acceptance about some of the situations within their lives, and so on and so forth. There's so many different concepts that go into why a person behaves a certain way, or how they develop a certain way, the behaviors and their actions. So keep that in mind. So why this series? Why Inside the Criminal Mind? Why Criminal Minds? Criminal behavior can be related to societal issues. And it goes even deeper than that. It's not just societal, but psychological. But what did I say about psychology? Whenever we can actually pinpoint why each individual acts a certain way, then we can have answers on how we, as a society, can collectively come together and find a solution to the problem. And Criminal Minds gives great examples of behaviors, and it creates multiple perspectives. So then that way we can look at it from different angles, from a criminal angle, from a non-criminal angle, from a civilian angle, whatever. It's important to consider, just because someone breaks a law of some sort, regardless of how horrible it is, what made them do that? Because that can shed a lot of light and a lot of emphasis on the societal issues that I just referenced. All right. So the synopsis. It's not really a good synopsis. I'm also going to be using my notes, and then I'll be showing you guys some of the fandom page for the episode. But so the episode opens with the murder of a sex worker. It's pretty graphic. Spencer runs into a teen male shortly after who expresses interest in Spencer's work. Spencer's obviously surprised because this teen, or this young man, looks very young. And it just kind of the way that the conversation came off kind of sent the alarm bells ringing in Spencer's head, and he's like, that's kind of weird. I don't know his name, whatever, but he knew my name. He apparently was at this college that I did a lecture at, type of situation. So he's like, I'm gonna look into this a little bit. But then, obviously, of course, as he gets to work, he realizes that DC might be having this issue where sex workers are being killed and just left for dead. And yeah. So obviously the first person that the BAU looks at is this kid. They come to find out that he's actually a sophomore in high school. And they find out that his father died when he was 9. We're going to get into that. His mom worked all the time. She allowed him to have a bunch of freedom. And, we can kind of see where certain things go. So yeah, let's look into this some more. Okay, so probably relevant theories. First, we're going to break this down because I want us to look at, there's two people that I want us to look at. I want us to look at the kid, and then I want us to actually look at the murderer, the actual guy who ended up being the murderer. So initially, Nathan Harris, which was the teen that you saw in that little clip, or in that little picture in the last slide, he initially exhibited shy-ish behavior, expressed interest in Spencer's lecture on compulsion. It wasn't really compulsion that he was doing. It was, I don't remember. I honestly don't remember what it was, but it wasn't compulsion. That's just what I had in my head. I was thinking about compulsion. But it was something about like sexual sadism is what it was. Sexual sadism or something along those lines. And so yeah, when Spencer finds him, and Nathan ends up opening up about his struggles with murderous thoughts. He says that he thinks about killing these sex workers. And, you know, obviously whenever someone, it's like the same thing as, you know, anybody here who might have had the unaliving thoughts. The unaliving thoughts, you know, if you've ever told somebody, I don't know, like in my experience, whenever I was a child, not a child, but whenever I was a teen and I was having those thoughts, I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody because the family that I grew up in very heavily stigmatized the idea of unaliving. And it made me feel very insecure about talking about these thoughts that I was having because in my family, it was looked at as, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just doing this for attention. And obviously, that creates a lot of issues. However, you know, in a healthier situation, whenever somebody says like, oh, I'm having thoughts of unaliving myself, usually the person who this person like is the consultant or the psychiatrist or whatever, they're concerned. You know, they want to make sure that this person's getting adequate help. So obviously, whenever Nathan is like, I'm having thoughts about killing these sex workers, he is, you know, Spencer and the rest of the team is like, whoa, all right. We think he should be getting a psych eval because we don't know if he is the guy that we're looking for. If he is, then okay, we have him in custody, but first let's get him a psych eval and figure it out. Obviously, another murder ends up happening. Well, it's not even really like explained that much, like the time period, because the way that it looked to me, obviously another murder happened while Nathan was getting his psych eval overnight or something of that matter. And, you know, someone else ended up being killed. So obviously Nathan shouldn't have been the killer, but they never actually ruled him out because as more killings started happening, they still had to bring him in into the juvenile hall or juvenile detention because it was a little weird. But moving on. Now for the actual killer. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen this, but like this season's been out for like more than 15 years, so that's on you. So Ronald Weems, which is an adult male who works for an advocacy group against crime. And there's a lot of political overtones or undertones in this episode. There is a period where Hotch is in his office and one of the congresswomen come in to talk to him and tell him, well, we don't want you to publicize these murders because, you know, ever since I was elected, you know, I've been working towards this, like, getting rid of crime initiative in DC. And so we're about to declare DC crime-free. And if we publicize these murders, then, like, there it goes. No one's going to take me seriously anymore. And obviously, this is how politics work. Honestly, this is how it works. That's how politics work. Anyways, so yeah, the actual killer ended up being a guy who worked for an advocacy group against crime. Whenever, obviously, he was angry about crime not actually being cleaned up, so he felt like he needed to take it into his own hands. It's kind of like a form of vigilantism in a way. There's a specific phrase I believe that they use, but I cannot think of it at the moment. But yeah, he basically suffered this compulsion to go out and kill these sex workers because he felt like nothing else was taking care of the crime. And, honestly, what someone wants to do in their own life, if that's their own choice, let them do that. But that's just my personal, little sprinkle of wisdom there. So anyway, initially, the MO seemed to reveal that there was sexual impotence. The sex workers were not sexually offended. They ended up he would cut off their hair and then carve messages into their stomachs. And frankly, there was only four girls that ended up murdered, but still, murder is not good. So anyway, however, as this took place in DC, an advocate against crime felt as if he was doing a justice to DC. He felt this compulsion. He felt impotent in his job, which was ultimately what led them to find him. He loathed the sex workers as he felt they added to the crime. So his pathology was sexual at the beginning, but then once they realized that it wasn't based on really being sexual, they realized that it had to have been an impotence in their job. So yeah, theories and relevant ideas. So Nathan Harris, you needed to get a psychological evaluation. And we're going to look at this if I can. Really? Let's do this. All right. Comprehensive psychiatric evaluation. I'm not 100% sure if this is actually what they ended up doing on him. I believe, because all it showed was Agent Gideon giving the kid, asking him questions. And there's not really any specific form, unlike, the PHQ-9 or the psychopathy checklist, that there isn't anything like that specifically for psychiatric evaluations. Not that I could find it, at least. I even checked in my textbook at school, okay? And there wasn't anything there. There might be different types, which I'm sure there are for children and adolescents and adults and seniors maybe, but I haven't found it. Anyways, so this is basically what a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation is. It's a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation may be needed to diagnose emotional, behavioral, or developmental disorders. An evaluation of a child, adolescent, or adult is made based on behaviors present and in relation to physical, genetic, environmental, social, cognitive, emotional, and educational parts that may be affected as a result of these behaviors. So, and who's usually evaluated? It's anybody. Anybody can be evaluated. What's involved? It's usually a description of behaviors. Agent Gideon asked him certain questions like, what kind of thoughts do you have? Why do you know why you have these thoughts? What do you feel when you have these thoughts? These are usually how they are. Description of behaviors. When do they happen? When do you have these thoughts of murdering sex workers? How long do these thoughts last? And what are the conditions in which the behaviors most often happen? The description, he would describe, he described in detail what he imagined. He would imagine what their blood felt like in his hands and dripping through his fingers. He imagined what their insides felt like. That was I got a huge feeling whenever I said that, but yeah, they had it. He just showed Gideon asking him questions, and this is basically how that went. Psychiatric interview, that's basically what it was a psychiatric interview. But yeah, I think you guys kind of get the gist of that. Okay. He ends up attempting to unalive himself, and thankfully, Spencer and Garcia ended up getting finding him right on time. And then he ended up institutionalized. So, like, literally the last 5 minutes of the episode, I will admit, I cried. I cried because it was an emotional moment. So, like, this kid, he ends up going down there to get a sex worker. And whenever he does that, he ends up picking one up. They go to a hotel. This girl's like trying to dance on him and everything. And he starts having these thoughts. It's kind of obvious. He doesn't say it, but he starts having these thoughts. And then he kind of freaks out. And then he literally takes out a razor. Yeah. And then the sex worker ends up calling Reed because obviously Reed gave this kid his business card. And so the sex worker ended up picking up the business card and calling Spencer. Wow, my brain just... Anyways. So anyway, they got there and Spencer literally saves this kid's life. If it wasn't for him, he would have bled out and he wouldn't have made it. So anyways, he ends up institutionalized. Ronald Weems, his MO. Let's check out the what do you call it? The fandom for Ronald Weems, which was actually the guy. He was actually the killer. So, Ronald Weems. We're just going to look at, obviously, not much is known about him, so it's really hard to actually break down what could potentially be causing this type of behavior. And where am I at? All is known that he had previously acted out strange sexual fantasies with his wife. He, at one point, in the process before he started murdering these sex workers, he had asked his wife to start doing kind of weird sexual fantasies that was probably out of her comfort zone. So obviously then he took matters into his own hands. So yeah, and then obviously it suddenly stopped. How this conversation happened, how we found out this information was that a few of the detectives or the agents ended up going up to the wife's house or going up to Ronald's house to go through his things in his office and whatnot. He had literally just left whenever they showed up, and Ronald's wife opens the door, and that's whenever they uncover some of that information. He ran an anti-crime advocacy group called Decency Watch, and apparently had an intense hatred of sex workers, calling them low women. And that was one of the things that he would tell them. He would call them low women, or that they're other choice words for sex workers, and then he would kill them. And all he would do would stab them, which indicates he's probably impotent. The fact that he chops off their hair and operates early in the morning indicates the unsub feels powerless. It could be more than sexual. He could feel impotent in his professional life, which was most definitely the case. And if that is the case, as it says here, he is killing sex workers because it's easy access. They were right across the street from the Capitol in this situation. So what was his MO? Dressed in all black clothing in the early morning hours, Weems would approach sex workers and solicit them. He would then take them to a secluded area, usually an alleyway, tell them that they are choice words that I don't say anymore. And where am I at? Lowly women, and then stab them to death with a knife. Afterwards, for unknown reasons, he would cut off the links of their hair, but he wouldn't take them with him. He would leave the locks of hair just around them. Anyway, in the case of his last victim, he killed her on the sidewalk at nighttime and didn't cut off her hair. On the second and third, a message was carved into their abdomens with the mark showing of hesitation. Now, what I thought was interesting. Obviously, what is one of the most notorious serial killers that we know of that targeted sex workers? Let's go all the way back. All the way back. I would think like 1800s or something. I don't remember. Jack the Ripper. So Weems appears to be based on Jack the Ripper, who was mentioned in the episode. Both were house cleaner type of serial killers who operated on city streets at night, targeted Caucasian female sex workers out of hatred, wore black clothing, used bladed weapons to kill them, left messages for authorities, desecrated the women's corpses, and would change from straight-up violent murders to distinctive MOs and back again. And obviously, if you've watched enough Criminal Minds, then you know that whenever behaviors start changing up, that's because they know that they're like someone's on their trail. Someone's on their trail, they'll change things up a little bit so that way they can't find me, and then they'll switch right back around. Obviously, it doesn't work like that though. So yeah. The Weems also appears to be inspired by Peter Sutcliffe. Both were house cleaner type serial killers who had unhappy marriages, exhibited sexually deviant behaviors, targeted sex workers motivated by an intense hatred of them and hoped to cleanse the streets of them. You guys basically get the picture, right? Oh, and then Gary Ridgway is another one that he also seems to be based off of. Both are serial killers who pressured their wives into fulfilling sexual fantasies before their murders, campaigned against sex workers in their neighborhood, lured sex workers to kill them because they had a pathological hatred of them, and weren't found originally due to a brief misdirection. Ridgway sent a letter that profiler John Douglas believed was unconnected. Weems inadvertently deflected suspicion onto troubled teenager Nathan Harris. Because obviously Nathan Harris and Ronald Weems had no connection in this whatsoever, which also opens up the discussion to how common it is for these types of behaviors to develop and how many could possibly be in the same area as you, considering how there were two people with these same types of thoughts just in this one part of DC. So who's not to say that, you got to keep these things in your head. You have to keep these things in your head and in discussion, and you have to keep talking about it. Otherwise, you never know. You just never know. I live in Oklahoma. Crazy stuff happens here all the time. And it doesn't get national news because it's Oklahoma. So, yeah, we get the gist of that. Anyways, moving on. So criminal prevention, basically what this is going to be is just a discussion. Nathan Harris. It's not very obvious, but it's a good part of the discussion that he lost his father when he was 9. His mother worked all the time. I believe they said she was a professor, but she was working all the time, and she gave her son lots of freedom. It's very possible, and there might be a better theory or scenario that can explain that the development of this type of behavior, but to me, it sounds a little bit like the Oedipus theory, the Oedipal complex. If anybody isn't familiar with that, what that usually is for males and females, it's very possible, depending on how you were raised, to either be absolutely infatuated with your mother or father or absolutely hate your mother and father. Basically just depending on how they treated you whenever you were a child and as you were growing up, and especially in the most formative years in childhood and adolescence. So to me, what this could possibly say, he was probably, depending on exactly how old he was, which they don't actually notate that, but depending on how old he was whenever his mother started leaving him alone, they made it seem like she started leaving him alone a lot after his father passed away. And by that logic, that tells me that right before he hit puberty, he was being left alone and unattended majority of the time. And, going through puberty is not the easiest thing to do, especially alone. Imagine being alone and going through something like puberty and not exactly knowing how to handle it. So you could possibly start having all of these crazy thoughts. Hormones make us do crazy things, especially during puberty. And also, what kind of content was he being exposed to? What kind of things did he see during these years and during the time that he was alone? Because it's very possible that his mother was never there to correct the situation or to explain certain scenarios to him. Like, imagine being 9 years old and watching Criminal Minds alone without having someone there to explain to you, it's okay, like, this isn't going to happen to you because blah, 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 or something. These types of things need to be explained, especially to children and adolescents, because there's so much that can go on. With Ronald Weems, there's a lot of comparisons made to him, as we saw on the fandom page. We saw that he's compared to Jack the Ripper, Gary Ridgway. Those are the two main ones that I remember that I know outside of just this project, and it. There's not really much known other than that he had these certain behaviors, like making his wife or asking his wife to act out certain sexual fantasies, and so on and so forth. Basically, he felt impotent in his job, or not really in his job, but he might have felt like the work that he was doing wasn't actually doing the work that he felt like should be done. Like I said, he doesn't take well to sex workers in the street, because he basically felt like they were contributing to the issue of crime. And, you also have to understand that I know in some places sex work is legal, and it should be. But in this type of scenario and in that time period, which was the early 2000s or mid 2000s, it probably wasn't legal, and, obviously it counts as a part of crime. So, yeah. All right. So basically, also, this is a major undertone that I just feel like a lot of people forget about. Politics changes everything. And they made a very good point. Like, whenever Hotch and that congresswoman, were having that meeting, she ends up seeing him again, because they did end up making these murders public. They did end up publicizing it because, people were in danger. Like, women on the streets needed to know what kind of danger was out there. And, she mentioned that, I can't even remember how it went. Oh yeah, that law enforcement and politics and I can't remember if she said the BAU or something like that. They all are interconnected. And it does, they really are. I mean, whenever we are thinking, we elect our sheriffs to our counties. That's law enforcement. So yeah, I mean, politics and law enforcement basically go hand in hand. If you want to get anything done, you also, you got to work with law enforcement too, apparently. Most criminal behavior could have been prevented with proper mental health intervention. And I know these last three things on here are the same as the two previous weeks, because it's true. It's true. With a lot of the criminal behavior, if we could have just had better observation of behaviors by outside people, that's like one of the crazy things. Like, psychology should totally be something that everybody at least needs to take like an intro class in, because it can really open up your perspectives. It can really open up your mindset and your perception. You can start seeing things from other sides, or you can look out, think outside the box. Basically, that's the trick here. Like, obviously, everyone thinks that everything can be black and white and good and bad, But the truth is that nothing is all the way good and nothing is all the way bad. There's always a gray area in between. And again, call this a call to action for Congress to implement better mental health programs to rehabilitate rather than cause more economic stress. I mean, like I said, if we can get ahead of the issues, then we have a fair chance. We can probably have a fair chance to actually stop certain things from happening. So I mean, really, if we, it's like having a business. Like, we should start thinking of like our country as a business that we want to invest in to make it better. You know, I don't know. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think I have some pretty good ideas. Anyways, this is a time for questions and comments and suggestions. You can just drop them in the chat. I'll just keep talking for like 2 minutes. So if anybody does have anything they want to say, you can drop it in the chat. But anyways, next week I'll be going over another episode, of course, as always. And like I said, this is going to be a 12-week thing. This is going to be going until the end of March. So hopefully, we can have a little bit more of a discussion, some more interaction in the chat, maybe. It's okay. I'm always happy to do this, even just to have a collection of videos that don't really get viewed. It's fine. But anyways, with that, hasn't been 2 minutes yet, so that's it. If nobody has any questions at the moment, I will go ahead and respect everybody's time and let everybody have a wonderful rest of their week and an amazing, restful, or productive weekend, whatever your vibe is. And I will be looking out for new comments on the videos. Anyways, I will see everybody next Thursday. I hope everyone has an amazing, amazing rest of their night, rest of their week.